On the 23rd of June this year, Britain voted to leave the European Union, as I'm sure you're all aware. Before the vote, the entire global economic establishment warned of the adverse consequences of Brexit, yet the majority of the population ignored them. A common reaction to this decision amongst the liberal, educated elite has been to blame ignorant voters and argue that their ignorance has caused us to drift into a post-truth society. We want to explore tonight the backdrop to the voters' rejection of the advice of economists and look at the relationship between these two parties that seemingly are increasingly at odds, in the hope of finding a more constructive way forward. Handily, this will also summarise some key themes of our new book. The rejection of the economists' advice represented by Brexit was perhaps so surprising because of the preceding place that economics had come to have in our society, weaving its way into our everyday life and becoming impossible to avoid and to ignore, or so we thought. The evidence for this in the recent past is not hard to find. During the 2015 general election, the economy was the most discussed item in the news apart from the election itself, and being seen as economically credible has become the most important part of any modern political campaign. Moreover, increasingly diverse areas of life are now justified in terms of their effect on the economy. One famous children's charity promoted a campaign for fathers to read to their children on the basis that improved literacy would increase GDP by 1.5%. Education generally, mental health, the value of the arts, the monarchy, all manner of things are now often reduced purely to their economic value. Economics has become ever-present and, in some senses, all-powerful. This fixation on the economy is interesting for many reasons, but I'm going to focus on two. Firstly, I'm going to briefly explore the history of this fixation and trace the development of a societal system that we have called econocracy. Afterwards, I'm going to talk about where the development of econocracy has left us as citizens. Our current understanding of the economy as a distinct sphere of human life is an entirely modern phenomenon. In general elections in the UK between 1900 and the end of the Second World War, the term economy was used only twice in any winning party's manifesto, both times to mean frugality. It was not until the 1950 Conservative Party manifesto that it appeared just once in its modern usage. It then appeared 10 times in 1955, and by 2015, in the winning Conservative Party manifesto, the word economy was mentioned 59 times. Often not even in sentences, just like big letters. World War II was crucial in the initial rise of economics. The war, which required an unprecedented mobilization of resources, brought economists to prominence as they were able to use their technical skills to do everything from planned shipping routes to war manufacturing. It also saw the development of the centralized state and its ability to gather information, which led to the birth of national income accounting, or GDP. After the war, economists cemented themselves in positions of prominence. We see this on a national level in the creation of institutions such as the Government Economic Service, which forms a backbone of the civil service in the UK, and on an international level in the creation of organisations such as the IMF, the World Bank, the OECD, and the World Trade Organization. What these developments have meant is that political decision-making on a global and national level is increasingly influenced by economics as a discipline, as policy is designed and carried out by economic experts in institutions of economic rationales. We see this all through politics and policy. The NHS purchases drugs and services using methods derived from economic theory. Financial regulation, and previously deregulation, has been justified, designed and implemented using arguments derived from economics. The IMF, the World Bank and the World Trade Organization often strongly pressure countries to enact policies that at the time were considered by economists to be desirable. In a little over 70 years, we have gone from the idea of the economy being marginal to having national and international institutions dedicated to monitoring and improving it, and to having many areas of politics revolve totally around it. We have called this shift the rise of econocracy, a term we have created to capture what modern societies have become. The definition we give for econocracy is a society in which political goals are defined in terms of their effect on their economy, which is believed to be a distinct system of its own logic that requires experts to manage it. So now, having discussed the rise of econocracy a little bit, I'm going to talk about where it leaves us as citizens. The centrality of economics in our political and social life today means that we must understand and be able to engage with economics in order to make sense of our world and to have a voice in it. Yet currently, economic decision-making is discussed in a language that few people can engage with and in places that few people have access to. We argue, therefore, that many people are denied their right to a voice. I think this is a feeling that resonates with lots of people. Whenever you talk to people like you're writing about economics, the first thing anyone ever says to you is, I just don't get it. But we also have done polling with YouGov to try and assess this. When asked, only 12% of people felt that politicians and economists talked about economics in a sensible way, and staples of political discussion, such as GDP and the government budget deficit, were shown to not be understood by large amounts of the population. We therefore believe that econocracy leads to two camps that become opposed to each other due to the different languages they speak and the competence they have engaging with this new form of politics. Widespread alienation from economics also makes it difficult for us to evaluate political narratives about the economy and hold our governments accountable. Finally, the distance between those who speak and own the language of economics and those who don't entrenches one of the prevailing features of econocracy, the idea that economics is a technical rather than a political exercise, best left to experts. This has perhaps best been seen by the trend of nations across the world to make central banks independent, whereby monetary policy and a host of other functions are no longer decided upon by politicians and are taken out of the sphere of democratic debate. One example of central bank policy also highlights how contentious political decisions are often masked in the technical mystique of economics. Quantitative easing was the primary response of many central banks to the economic slump that followed the financial crisis. Quantitative easing can loosely be thought of as printing money. The central bank creates money, which has the power to do, and then uses it to try and stimulate the economy by buying government bonds and other financial assets. The bank argues that the majority of people have benefited from the policy, but admits that it has had skewed distributional effects. Because wealthier people tend to own more of the assets that the bank are buying, they benefit more, with the top 5% of households in particular benefiting. Quantitative easing therefore shows an example of a depoliticised economic policy, the effects of which, if it had been authorised by a government through a tax break, would have formed a central part of political discussion. Yet in polling we found that only 30% of people could pick the correct definition of quantitative easing, and who can really blame them? Such policies are presented in a technical way with names that seem almost purposely designed to be off-putting and difficult to engage with. We therefore cannot have a public discussion about the policy, its effectiveness, or possible alternatives to it. Of course, this is in many ways the point. Such decisions are not deemed important to the public realm. Yet we argue that economics is inherently political. Even how to define economic success is a political rather than a technical question, as decisions about what to measure and how both reflect and influence collective values about what is important. For example, in the UK, we don't attempt to measure the vast amounts of care work that occur in our society. As a consequence, the daily activities of millions of people, mainly women, are deemed unproductive and made invisible in economic terms. This is an implicit judgment that the work families and individuals do in bringing up their elderly and kids is not important, is not important to the functioning of our social and economic system. In our book, our overall point, therefore, is that we need to turn economics into a public conversation. We are currently conducting politics in a way that excludes the voice of many people, and as a corollary, are delegating important political decisions to experts without ensuring there is real public accountability. That, to us, leaves our society in a situation where we're only as good as those experts' expertise. Kahal is now going to explore why that may be problematic. Thank you for listening.